Okay, as Mike mentioned, guys, my name is Cory Vokey. I run the services, sales, and delivery practice for Red Hat Canada. In today's presentation, I'm going to be covering three main items. I'll be discussing one of the biggest problems that we see in the industry today, and that's IT currency, or technology modernization. I'll also be discussing, in my opinion, one of the most interesting service offerings that we have at Red Hat today, and that's our Open Innovation Labs residency program. I'll also be overlaying some personal experiences on where I personally succeeded in helping organizations transform and uplift their technology, and more importantly, how I failed. Right, so I have some of those as well. But before we begin, a little bit about my background. I've been at Red Hat now for 2 years. In actuality, it'll be 2 years February 1st, so next Thursday, so it's a big milestone for me. Previous to Red Hat, I was an executive at a large bank. Now, I won't say a large bank every time I mention my history, so it was TD Bank, just to let you guys know. In that role, I was an executive over a large engineering group, had 300 engineers, and a budget of $150 million. In that role, I had the privilege of running a $100 million technology currency program, which again, I'll go through some of the stories on. Prior to TD, I was at BlackBerry for approximately 8 years in roles ranging from software development, architecture, engineering, and I left there as the director in charge of global IT operations. Before we begin, a couple more things. I'm also born and raised in a small fishing village in Newfoundland. So you will see that when I get passionate about a subject, I tend to talk very fast, and an extremely thick accent, or tick accent, will come out. If that happens, and this is a distraction, someone please just signal, and I'll pump the brakes on it as much as I can. Also, in an audience this size, guys, I would love, and I encourage you to please, if you have any questions, interrupt, put up your hand, and let's make this as interactive as possible. Okay, without further ado, let's get going. So, technology change. When we're looking at technology change in the industry today, organizations that look at the people first, the culture first, really see the benefits of what all of the vendors are talking about. And one of the key messages I wanted in this slide is to say that you can't buy your way into certain things. Like, you can't buy your way into DevOps. DevOps is not a tool. Though you'll see tools out there that say, oh, we're DevOps ready. DevOps is not so much a tool. It's more of a culture. It's more of a process. Cloud is another one. We're seeing organizations over the past few years really miss their expectations on cloud. An ex-CTO of mine always say, Cory, if you're coming at me with a your mess for less proposition, go away. It just doesn't work. And it really doesn't. To get the value out of technologies like cloud, organizations who look at the culture, the processes, the application profile, and where it would fit, go to cloud for the right reasons and see benefits. Those who look at it as just basically something that they got to do, or a cost play, really don't see the value, and we've seen that time and time again. So I mentioned technology modernization and currency. It's one of the biggest problems that we see in the industry today. And what I've seen, it's a $1 billion problem in large organizations. Now, how did we get here? Back in 2007 and 2008, during the economic downturn, most organizations started to defer their IT spend. So the spend that they would use to uplift their technology stack, to keep their employees uplifted from a skill set perspective, to modify their processes, they deferred that spend year over year. And that's resulted now in a huge technology debt in the organizations that we work with. Okay, so it's like not paying your credit card, for 10 years. You have $20,000 you put on each year. At the end of 10 years, you don't owe $200,000. It's more like $2 million. It's the same thing in technology. You look how most of us are structured today. You have storage groups, network groups, server groups, compute groups, security groups, virtualization groups, database groups, middleware groups, tools groups, application groups, all basically trying to work together. And each one of these silos have their own vice presidents, a lot of them, their own directors, their own management, etc. So trying to make a change to one, even from a political perspective, is a nightmare, let alone from a technology perspective. Now, I would imagine everybody here was hit with the Windows 2003 fiasco a few years back, where we had to uplift or pay a huge CSA to Microsoft. That really brought to light some of the key challenges. You look at it and say, okay, no problem, we'll just upgrade to Windows 2003 to, I guess back then was Windows 2012 R2. And you try to do that and say, okay, well, the hardware that we have doesn't run Windows 2012 R2. The database that this application resides on doesn't run on 2012 R2, nor do the applications. So it's a huge ripple effect. Okay? So and it's an extremely complex situation to deal with. And it's been something that's been plaguing us now for 5 or 6 years. Our approach at Red Hat is something different that I'll get into, but we feel that we have a pragmatic approach that really takes something, builds up small successes over time to get huge wins. I mentioned before that I ran a large currency program at TD Bank. And during that program, the first year, I did everything what any core technologist would do. And by the way, as a core technologist, I'm probably the only ex-title officer at any financial institution that actually has a Linux tattoo since 2000 on the shoulder. So I am a core technologist through and through. So, I had a whole bunch of funding the first year to get this currency program kicked off. So I did everything that you would expect out of a core technologist. I said, okay, I'm going to build this kick-ass environment. Okay, it's going to be fully automated. It's going to be all the whiz-bang features. It was all there. This is back in 2013. And lo and behold, after a year of getting all this done, I tried to now put some applications on it. And it didn't work. The applications were too old. They wouldn't reside on this net new environment. So after that, I took my lashings, I licked my wounds, and we sort of regrouped as a team. And we took a different approach the year following. We said, okay, well, why don't we work with our business? Why don't we knock down some silos, create some focused teams, and see what we can do the following year? So the following year, we picked 10 applications. And we looked at the requirements of those applications. We said, okay, well, instead of looking at the infrastructure up, building this shiny infrastructure, and then build it and they will come, and ending up in another failure, we looked at it from the application down. So we took 10 applications, we looked at the requirements, and at the end of 6 months, we actually got 10 applications modernized. Okay, so that was a big win versus the X year of just basically, and I will not pat myself on the back, but kick myself to say that was a waste of time. Right? So the approach and the key thing here and the key message is when you have an organization of any size, you can't lather or lash it, or I should say layer everything with the same brush. You have to look at small wins, create an infectious environment where you can succeed, and then keep turning up the dial on those small wins. Now, we'll say there's a term called strangle the monolith. Now, what that means is basically take your monolith, your legacy workloads, address it, agree that it's there, and again, bit by bit, time over time, take it and reduce that monolith. Now, I will tell you another funny one. I was in Calgary about 4 or 5 months ago, and I was doing the same presentation to a smaller audience. It's one client, and they were looking for us to help modernize their environment. And I said strangle the monolith. And it was funny, the lady took me aside after. She said, Cory, you realize you have a huge cauliflower ear on your left side. I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, by the way, competitively. And she said, you cannot say strangle the monolith. People get nervous. So for some reason, I have to say cuddle or caress the monolith. But if you don't have this infliction, you can say strangle. But nevertheless, the key theme here is basically, when you're dealing with a huge problem, you got to deal with it, but chunk over chunk. Any questions on that, by the way? Comments, questions? No? Okay. And again, it's about, sorry guys, 2 presentations going here. It's about basically knocking down the silos and getting things done together. So organizations that can knock down the silos, get things to get done together, see huge benefits. Our CEO, Jim Whitehurst, he wrote a book called The Open Organization. And it was really about his experience coming from a command and control structure, and I believe it was Delta Airlines, into Red Hat back in 2008. Right? And to get the benefits that we see today in Agile and DevOps, and really to move the needle, it's really a leadership style that really has to be adopted as well. And it takes one from more, if you see on the left side, a command and control leadership style, to more of a servant leadership style. One where leaders enable the teams. Things are done and decisions are made transparently and collaboratively. It's a big shift from a command and control. As I mentioned, I was at BlackBerry for approximately 8 years. And it's funny, I started there in 2003, 2004. And it was the extreme example of servant leadership. So our leaders there were they were on our side. They removed any roadblocks. The teams underneath really held a lot of power and made a lot of decisions. But as we grew over time, we started adopting more executives from outside organizations that were really more of a command and control, had more command and control leadership style. And there was a particular use case that really affected myself and my team at the time, whereby as we're exploding from a subscriber's perspective, and not exploding from a downward business perspective, back in the day when everything was going good, we had this use case where we had to light up data centers anywhere in the world over a weekend. And what I mean by over a weekend was the plumbing was all there. We had to layer our application, provision, and enable traffic to flow over a weekend. We couldn't get it done. It was very manual. It took about 2 weeks. And every time we lit up a new data center, it was always wrought with errors, right? Configuration errors, it's just errors. So one of the new command and control executives came in, and they did what any command and control sort of organization would do. They created a 200-person team, and they bought a $20 million tool set. Okay, fast forward 8-9 months, weren't moving the needle at all. So what do? You blame the tool. Okay, so lo and behold, we had lots of money at the time. So another $20 million tool set came in. So 6 or 7 months later, failure again. Yet again, another $20 million tool set. So $60 million in tools, a team now that grew to about 300 people, still couldn't get to end a job. I had the lion's share at that time, leading this from a services perspective. And my team, 2 engineers, came to me one morning and said, Cory, we have a way to do this, but we need your ear cover, we need your support, can we try it? And again, the use case was layering down the application over a weekend. So for your techies in the room, they use system imagers and PHP. That afternoon, they had it done, a skeleton framework. That weekend, they tested it out. The following weekend, we actually lit our first data center up, error-free, over a weekend. Right? So think about the effect of that. Think about the effect of leadership style where you actually have the right people doing the right job with the right ear cover, able to fail but pivot and get to an end result. So compare that to 2 years, 300 people, $60 million, no end of job. 2 really smart people, an afternoon, end of job. Right? So make no mistake, a new way of working, the agile way of working, and taking this leadership style and really building the culture in the organization can yield amazing results, and we see it time and time again. So again, Red Hat, open source. We're all known for open source, but open source is more about just code. It's all about culture. So we see this every day. All right, so Agile, DevOps, has nothing to do with Red Hat. We've been open source since 1993. So this is ingrained in our DNA. So our goal with this was to create, or we saw an opportunity in the market, I should say, to basically showcase and educate our clients on how we develop code. So I'll move now over to Open Innovation Labs. So why did it come about? Our board of directors challenged my leadership team about 2.5 years ago to basically address some of the key concerns of our clients. So those are concerns like digitization, transformation, adopting cloud technologies, adopting agile methodologies, all the buzzwords you see. But they had a couple of requirements. They said it can't be a PowerPoint. Okay, it has to be tangible, it has to be quick, and it has to showcase how we do things to our clients in a quick manner. And what we came up with was an Open Innovation Labs residency program. So what is it? It's a program whereby we pair either 3 or 6 of our client developers with 3 or 6 Red Hat developers. We bring them through 2 4-week sprints usually. It can go anywhere between 6 and 12 weeks, with the goal of creating a minimum viable product of either a net new application, so greenfield application, or modernizing a legacy application. And remember, the goal here is not just the MVP. That's the tangible. The goal is more the education and the pull-through. It's sort of to showcase the developers and how to work in real DevOps tool sets and the DevOps methodology. Showcase the value of agile project methodologies and prove to their organizations and their executives on the impact that that can have. And I will say, we just finished our largest one in Ontario. It's the biggest one we actually ever sold in the world. And their use case, it was a healthcare organization, their use case was to build a mobile application to view patient and clinician lab results. They tried to get this done before using a waterfall project methodology, as well as some legacy technology. And fast forward 2 years, I'm not sure how much money they spent, but anyway, they couldn't get to end a job. So they came to us, we went through this residency program, and at the end of the 2 4-week sprints, lo and behold, they have 12 other capabilities that they planned, done, fully complete, and demoed to their executives. The key thing, though, was at the end of the second week, they actually had 3 of the core capabilities. And after the second week, every second day, they were able to demo their results to their executives. Now, what does that really mean? It's not just a showcase demoing the result and say, hey, look what we've done. They were able to get real-world, real-time feedback from their executives on their progress. If there's anything that needed to be changed, they were able to pivot the next day and showcase the day after what they had done. So at the end of the 8 weeks, the minimum viable product, it was no surprise from the executives what they were getting, but they actually had a feedback loop that the executives knew, and they had some feedback what the end result would be. Right? And I would say when you're looking at digital transformation, you're looking at transforming teams, transforming processes. I was also involved in a huge $150 million transformation program, not directly involved, it didn't lead it, but I saw it from the outskirts, thank goodness. And it's funny, we've got this large consulting company out of the US that came in, and they were looking to basically change up all of our processes. And we had KPIs coming in. So make a long story short, at the end of the engagement, $150 million, a year and a half, our KPIs were 800% worse. Right? Can you believe it? I mean, think about that. People lost their jobs over that. But think about how that came about. So any organization, and I don't mean to sound too harsh when I say this, but I will say you're as dumb as you're ever going to be at the start of any engagement. What that means is you don't know what you don't know. So if you're looking to plan out a large transformation exercise in a waterfall approach, and what I mean by that is it depicts everything in swim lanes and timelines, everything that you're going to get done over a year and a half. You don't know what you're going to know, you don't know. You come into a roadblock, instead of pivoting and passing through that roadblock, you go through a change control process that takes 3 to 4 months. And lather, rinse, repeats, and lo and behold, you fail. Our approach is the polar opposite of that. Our approach is risk-free, showcase what you can do, build off that success. If it's not a success, there's no real big sunk cost. You pivot and you turn it into a success. That's the way to make lasting change. I'll pause there. Please, I asked for some questions. Does anybody have any questions at all? Yes, sir. Great question. So did everyone hear that question, by the way? The question was that from a compliance and regulatory perspective, how do we ensure that though you can create applications very quick, how do you ensure that the governance and the compliance regulations that an organization has to abide to are still withheld? Does that sum it up okay? Okay. So yeah, you can be agile, you can get things done fast. We have to understand the environment you're in, whether it's in healthcare, manufacturing, finance, it's vastly different, right? So the ecosystem that we have to develop in is well known in the beginning, right? So data sovereignty, data residency, how you secure data, those requirements are sort of basically locked in, so we work within those requirements. Those don't go away. So just because you're agile and fast doesn't mean you can say, okay, I'm going to forget security, or if you're a healthcare provider, I'm going to put all my clinician data in the US in a cloud. Doesn't mean that at all. It's like I was joking with another client of mine. I said, you can hire a bunch of people with high top shoes, skinny jeans, and a man bun. You're not a Silicon Valley startup, right? Sorry, right? It doesn't work. You still have to be, who you are in the organization you're in.
How do you fit
right.
into the deployment cycle? Because I get fast deployment or fast rapid iterations. How do you get it through that approval process? Is that very big?
But once you do it once, you shouldn't have to do it twice if it's the same use case. So I would say in any application, you can set up your workload into 2 different contexts. There's transactional workloads that are very easy to do whatever you need to do with. But then there are stateful workloads, and that's more your context, is where you maintain state. You have to ensure that where you maintain state from a data perspective complies to your organization's, again, compliance and regulatory commitments. But you can then basically create a facade on the top of that to basically have this agile environment to do things quick, still acknowledging basically the state that you have to protect. That's one way we look at it, and we look at organizations that have a strict stateful requirement and work with them. That make sense? And the nice thing is, in an agile environment and a real DevOps, you have everyone in the same room. So the structure of these teams, you actually have a product owner, you have a scrum master, then you have your developers and everyone underneath. The product owner is really the gatekeeper to ensure that everything's going okay. But the difference is it's not a chain. Everyone's in a room for a daily stand-up. So if there's something that's going haywire or going off the rails from any perspective, you're able to basically pivot immediately, get it back on track, and show results quickly. Right? Like, it's not rocket science. It's quite simple. It's just basically structuring it in an appropriate way. No, great point. Now, I will say, when organizations look at adopting all the technologies that you hear today from Red Hat, and that you're going to continue to hear, everyone looks at it from a greenfield perspective, right? And there's also, as I mentioned before, process culture is a key item, but people is also one of the main items as well. And my old chief CIO at TD was a chief CIO at Citi for a long time. And he did something very interesting there when he was looking at changing, because he had a huge legacy environment. Citi is a big, big environment. And what he did was he created two distinct organizations that are mutually exclusive of one another. He had a legacy organization, where it's the same people that have been there 20, 30 years. But then he started carving out a net new organization, okay, that had net new processes, adopted net new methodologies. Why is this important? Everyone from a technology perspective say, oh, that's cool, it's easy now to put greenfield in. But there's a different lens to put on this, and that's a human lens. You have organizations with employees that have been around for 30 years that are very loyal, that have a lot of value and a lot of knowledge around your business. That approach, it was a very, I want to say romantic, I don't have another word for it, but it really took into account the people side of things. So as the people managing like the AS400 environments or the token ring environments or whatever environment that they had, as they retired out of the organization, he made a conscious effort to take their responsibilities, re-platform them, re-architect the applications that they were running, put them over then into, Gartner would call it mode 2, I don't really like calling it that, but over to the net new environment. Right? So as his employees retire off, instead of basically 10 years, they have 5 to 10 years to retire and say, okay, you don't have a job anymore, we're going to create it to this group. He let them continue on, providing the value that they've always provided. And as they retired, that was his impetus to basically make the change. So 2 years before they left the organization, their work moved over. So that was a very interesting way to sort of take everything into account. So we always get, yes, Jamie, sorry. Okay, it's always, and again, I'm guilty of it as well. You always look at the next new shiny object. You're not really looking at the platform that was, 30 years in the making. And again, my old CTO was pretty eccentric. He came with the your best for less. What he also said was, you can't, do something. What he said was, you can't bleep something up for 20 years and then change it on a dime. What he meant by that was, you can't run an organization a certain way for 20 years and then all of a sudden wake up and say, we're going to be agile DevOps and just change everything. It doesn't work like that, right? You have to take into it, it's a multifaceted discussion with multiple lenses you have to look through, right? Luckily, our Innovation Labs offering takes the first step in actually showcasing the value, but it's intended then for the organization over a couple of iterations to take what they've learned through this engagement, build off it in-house. We're not involved anymore. Now it's ingrained within the fabric of the organization, and over time you make some lasting change. And I think that's heart of hearts. I mean, I'm not up here just presenting a Red Hat message. This is a very personal message here. If I didn't truly believe that our methodology is the best, I wouldn't say it. I just wouldn't be here today. It is. So to your point, would we ever say this is not the right scenario for you? No. Where we would say it is if you do not have aspirations to change, which is fine. You own the organization. It's your organization. If you don't want to change, don't change. Be happy doing what you're doing and move on. If you do have aspirations to change, we have a great message for you, and we have a great methodology with a proven track record. So how do you get started was your first question. Sorry, I started from your last question back. But basically, you have aspirations to change first and foremost. You have some money to basically make that change, right? This is not free, right? We have a workload in mind. So you have something now of focus, and you have a team that you could dedicate upwards to 6 to 12 weeks. Really, it works out to be 8 weeks that you could dedicate off-prem. You don't flying them anywhere. We create a pop-up facility near your office, and they're with us for 8 weeks. It's a rough 8 weeks. It's exciting, but it's not a fluffy 8 weeks. They're doing real work, right? And your goal as an organization is you're willing to take that investment from a money and time perspective in educating your staff, in taking a chance that DevOps is and Agile and the open source stack is the right one for you, and proving it out once and for all if it is. And the nice thing, if it's not, you don't have to go through a year-long assessment. You don't have to go through a bunch of RFPs with all your different groups. You can say, we tried it, we spent some money, we got these people through. It really doesn't fit in our environment. We're not going to move forward, but now you know. More than likely, though, what ends up happening is 90–95% of what was done is actually extremely beneficial and eye-opening to organizations. And what you do, the 5% that's not, you drop, and then within yourself, you then morph that into something that's extremely successful to you. I mean, let's face it, every organization is different. Like this gentleman mentioned, compliance, regulatory, your industry you're in, you have different demands. You know, some organizations from a workload perspective are heavily batch. Some are extremely heavily transactional and can spread out. Some have, you know, need 3 or 4 releases a week. Some need a release every 6 months. Right? So you have different needs and different requirements, right? So, I mean, what I would say is, please, I mean, if you're interested, and this sounds good, and you have aspirations to change, please work with your local account exec, which is Jamie. He'll engage myself. We bring in our top talent from Silicon Valley. We sit with you for a day. We walk through via a bunch of impact mapping exercises with your product owner, teams, and executives. And then we present an approach document that depicts exactly how we're going to get to the minimum viable product. Now, it's not how by a waterfall perspective. It's like these are the exercises we're going to go with a goal of creating a minimum viable product. So then you can make the decision. Do you want to move forward or not? Did that answer your question, Jamie?
Yeah. And there's no cost to that.
Now, I would say it's a time effort on everybody. It's not something, don't use it as an education. Like if you have aspirations, if you really are serious about it, please move forward. If not, apparently I got 10 minutes left, you know, don't waste your time. Like I say, if you're happy doing what you're doing, that's perfectly okay. Keep on keeping on, and that's an approach as well. Right. Okay. So moving forward now, guys, I will say I'm not a big PowerPoint person. These slides look really good, and this was done by somebody else and not me. We compare our Innovation Labs residency program to the experience you see at a Michelin 5-star restaurant, where you have a kitchen that's very open, transparent. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You have the chefs, which are our people, of course. You're the best in the business, the best tools. Everyone's accountable. The pipeline, you know, and the meal, the end result, and it can be continuously improved on. I don't like the analogies. I've been through this enough. I'd rather share some experiences than go through analogies. But it's the key message of these slides is, again, the experience itself. It's an eye-opener from a lot of teams that of the transparency and breaking down the walls. The experience that this large healthcare organization in Ontario saw was that at the end of the 8 weeks, the facility that we had them in, the experience of actually being a part of a close team with their own people, a couple of them actually had tears leaving the last day. Now, I will say I don't blame them. I walk through some of these offices and they're all yellow cubes and everyone's walled off and they don't really talk to one another. But the experience of actually them coming together in a very hip, trendy environment and actually achieving a result together was very bonding with that team. And they've still bonded today. So it is very impactful to the teams. So we want you to experience DevOps in our kitchen. We want you to experiment, you know, immerse your team, and basically help be the catalyst for innovation. Now, we'll take a plug for Red Hat Consulting as well on this. Our entire approach in anything you do with us is not to be a bum in the seat for you. We're not a large SI. We can't have people on your bench for years on end. Our model is to come in, get you to end a job as quickly as possible, leave, and then do it again at another client. Now, when I say get you to end a job, that's also educate your team, mentor, so you're self-sufficient. So a successful engagement for us is that when it ends, you're not calling us back. You're self-sufficient and you can move forward. That's success. Success is not winning a year contract and putting 2 bums in a seat for a year. Right? The type of talent that we hire, they need variety, they want to be back and forth, and they want to see the quick wins as well. So it's a bit different of a model. And I would say this new approach, I touched on it, but I will summarize. A couple of things that you'll see. The culture of innovation. The culture that we sort of breed in innovation labs and organizations that go through this, you take it from a culture of, yeah, maybe, you know, that's not really my job, to, yeah, hell yeah, we can make that change to that application. No problem. We'll get her done. And it'll be done this Friday. You can demo it, and you can, you know, figure out when we put it in production. And the last one there is the risk. Right? Like everyone talks about speed to value. That's common. I mean, you will get that, of course. But from a risk perspective, I mentioned before the transformation program that I was personally a part of. We're not saying $150 million a year and a half, that you've got to just cross your fingers and hopefully that 18 months you actually come out on top. This is after the end of 8 weeks. You get to determine, is this something you want to continue or you're not? Right? So from a risk perspective, it's extremely attractive. So guys, I'm going to pause there for a moment. Do you have any questions? Any more for me? So, okay, if there's not, that's all I have today. So on behalf of Red Hat, yes, sir.
So in your experience seeing organizations go through culture change, really that's an emerging
That's a complex question. So each organization is different. It really comes from a leadership perspective, right? So do you have leaders that can give up a command and control? Do you have leaders at the top that basically say, you know, I want to be a servant leader, and I want to build an organization where actually I get constant feedback? You know, for some, that's not really an attractive, you know, endeavor. You know, for others, it's courageous leadership really is the key, right? So you have that, and you have someone who really is bought in, who can put the investment, who can take the risk and sort of put themselves, you know, behind the people, or not on top. So if you look at the command and control leadership style, the leader is key, right? They're at all the events, they're speaking, they're doing everything else. The team just basically takes, you know, commands. That type of culture, you're not going to get much innovation. You're not going to get that feedback loop, and that's going to stifle you overall. But again, that's your organization. I'm not here to say that's wrong or right. It's your organization. But if you aspire to do the things that everyone's talking about, like you hear on all these technology presentations, understand that from a leadership perspective, it's not about spending a bunch of money. It's making a conscious effort to change that culture, and you have to look within. So I'll sum it up with that. We can go down into other situations, but if I was to sum it everything up at a high level, that's definitely the number one key factor. So guys, before I close, anything else? Okay, so yes, sir.
I got a question. So if somebody was running through this process and we kind of like drill down tactically, like, are they coming as an organization with a business problem that the people that you have on the kind of mentorship or helping them with, or like?
Yeah, so it is pretty exhaustive. That's a good question. So the question was, when you engage Red Hat, do you come with a predefined business problem? That's exactly what you do. So the business problem is by way of a workload. So you have a use case, whether that's a greenfield application or a legacy application that you want to modernize, and we make you fill out, you know, a big questionnaire. That's not just, again, it's not fluff. It's like exactly what is success look to you? What is the workload? What does it do? Is it stateful? Is it stateless? What is your team makeup? How are you structured today? And then we meet with you when we present, and we go through what's called an impact mapping exercise, which we go through everything, which depicts then what an optimal scenario would be to get to your minimum viable product.
So that's the goals, actors.
Correct. Correct. And the optimal team makeup as well. So for instance, if you have a UI workload, we'd have a UI developer. If you have an integration workload, we have an integration developer. The consistency is in the product owner and the scrum master. Those are consistent throughout, but the workload would depict the makeup and who we would staff with you as well. No problem. Yes, yeah, I can definitely get a PDF going of that. Yeah, no problem at all. So guys, before I end, anything else? Okay, so guys, on behalf of Red Hat, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you.